Captain Lee Daeho adjusted his uniform as he walked through the massive corridors of Nexus Prime. The Galactic Council's main station was bigger than most cities on Earth. Alien creatures from dozens of worlds moved past him, but none looked him in the eye. Humans had that effect on other species. Fear mixed with respect, though Lee wasn't sure the respect part was real anymore. Ambassador Park Ji-won waited for him outside the council chambers. Her face looked tired. 15 years of dealing with alien politics would do that to anyone. "They're calling it a routine peacekeeping mission," she said quietly. "Same as always." Lee nodded. Same as always meant humans would do the fighting while the council members stayed safe in their fancy chairs. He'd lost count of how many routine missions had cost human lives, while alien politicians took credit for the peace that followed. "What's the target this time?" Lee asked. "The Helix Rebellion. Apparently they're threatening shipping lanes." Park handed him a data pad. "Standard suppression protocol. Go in, remove the threat, establish order." Lee looked at the mission details. Something felt wrong, but he couldn't put his finger on it. The rebel forces seemed small for the level of concern the council was showing. "How many ships are they sending us?" "Just your battle group. They say it's all that's needed." That was the first red flag. The council usually sent overwhelming force to any problem. Sending just one battle group meant either the threat was tiny, or they didn't want too many human eyes on whatever was happening in the Helix system. Dr. Yoon Tai-min hurried toward them, his research materials scattered in his arms. The xenoarchaeologist looked excited about something. "Ambassador Park, I need to speak with you about the Helix system. I've found some interesting historical records." "Not now, Doctor. Captain Lee has a mission to prepare for. But this is important. The Helix system has a significant archaeological value. There are ruins there that predate the Council by thousands of years. If there's military action planned—" "Doctor," Park's voice carried a warning. "The mission parameters are classified." Yoon's face fell. He clutched his data closer to his chest. "Of course, I understand." But his eyes met Lee's for a moment, and the captain saw worry there. Commander Kim Bo-ra was waiting in the docking bay when Lee returned to his ship. She was reviewing the mission data on her own pad, her brow furrowed in concentration. Bo-ra was the best tactical officer Lee had ever worked with. If something was bothering her, it was worth listening to. "Captain, I've been studying the intelligence reports," she said. "The rebel positions don't match the patrol routes they're supposedly attacking. Look at this." She showed him a star map. "The shipping lanes run here, but the rebel bases are marked over here, almost 50 light-years away." Lee studied the map. Bo-ra was right. It would be impossible for rebels based in those positions to threaten the shipping lanes effectively. Maybe the intelligence is old. That's what I thought. But the timestamps show this data is only 3 days old. And there's another thing. Bo-ra switched to a different screen. The rebel communication intercepts mention civilians' families. The reports describe them as military targets, but the chatter sounds like refugee camps. A cold feeling settled in Lee's stomach. "Are you sure about this?" "As sure as I can be, without being there myself. Captain, I think we need to request additional intelligence before we proceed." Lee wanted to agree, but he knew how the council worked. Questioning orders led to delays, and delays led to humans being labeled as unreliable allies. Humanity's position in galactic politics was already shaky. They couldn't afford to appear weak or hesitant. "We follow orders, Commander, but we go in carefully. Full reconnaissance before any military action." Bo-ra nodded, but Lee could see she wasn't satisfied. Neither was he. The next morning, Lee found Dr. Yoon waiting outside his quarters. The archaeologist looked like he hadn't slept. "Captain, I need to tell you something about the Helix system. Yesterday, when I tried to access the historical archives for that region, my clearance was revoked. 20 years of research access gone overnight. Maybe it was a computer error. I tried to contact the archive administrators. My communications were blocked. Captain, they don't want anyone looking into the history of that system. Why would the council care about archaeological research unless there was something they wanted to hide?" Lee felt the pieces of a puzzle shifting in his mind. but he couldn't see the full picture yet. What kind of historical significance are we talking about? The ruins in the Helix system are from the ancients, the civilization that existed before the current galactic order. If the stories are true, they were destroyed by... Yoon paused. By coordinated attacks that wiped out entire worlds. The words hung in the air between them. Lee knew about the ancients from basic galactic history, an advanced civilization that had simply vanished one day, leaving only ruins and questions behind. The official story was that they had destroyed themselves in a civil war. Doctor, you're suggesting the Council was involved in genocide thousands of years ago. I'm not suggesting anything, Captain. I'm just telling you what the records indicated before my access was cut. And I'm wondering why they don't want anyone looking at those records now. Later that day, Lee's battle group departed Nexus Prime. 5 ships carrying humanity's best soldiers and most advanced weapons. As they jumped to hyperspace, Lee couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into something much worse than a simple rebellion. Commander Borah joined him on the bridge as they approached the Helix system. Captain, I've been thinking about the intelligence reports. What if we're not going to fight rebels? What if we're going to fight people who discovered something the Council doesn't want revealed? Lee looked out at the stars. In a few hours, they would drop out of hyperspace and see what was waiting for them in the Helix system. Part of him hoped it would be exactly what the mission briefing said, a simple rebellion that needed to be stopped. But the larger part of him, the part that had kept him alive through 15 years of serving the Council's interests, was preparing for something much worse. All hands prepare for system entry, he announced. And remember, we get a full picture before we take any action, no matter what the orders say. The stars shifted as they dropped out of hyperspace. What they found, waiting for them, would change everything. The Helix system looked nothing like the mission briefing had described. Commander Kim Borah stared at her scanner readings, checking them 3 times before speaking. Captain, I'm not detecting any military installations. What I'm seeing are civilian settlements. Captain Lee Dae-ho moved to the tactical station. The main screen showed a planet dotted with small communities, gardens, schools, what looked like hospitals. Children played in courtyards while adults worked in fields. This wasn't a rebel stronghold. This was a place where families lived. Are you certain about those readings, Commander? Completely certain, sir. I'm detecting agricultural equipment, civilian transportation, residential power grids. If there are weapons down there, they're hunting rifles and farming tools. Captain Oh Minji's voice crackled over the communication system from her destroyer, Escort. Captain Lee, my sensors are picking up distress signals from the planet's surface. They're asking for help, not threatening anyone. Lee felt sick. The mission briefing had been clear: neutralize hostile rebel forces threatening galactic shipping. But there were no rebels here, only families who seemed to be running from something. All ships, hold position. Do not target anything until we understand what we're looking at. The communication officer turned toward Lee. Sir, we're receiving a transmission from the planet. They want to talk. Put it through. The voice that came through the speakers was tired and desperate. Human ships, please, we need your help. We have evidence that the Council has been lying to everyone. They've been killing entire species and they're coming for us next. Borah looked at Lee with wide eyes. The same sick feeling was growing in her stomach. Captain, I think we need to hear what they have to say. Sir, the communication officer interrupted. I'm also receiving urgent transmissions from Lieutenant Kang Yu-jin. She's requesting immediate permission to conduct a planetary survey. Lee knew Kang. She was stationed on one of the escort ships as an intelligence officer. If she was asking for a survey, she had probably detected something important. Permission, granted. But keep it quiet. 2 hours later, Kang's report came through on a secure channel. Her voice was shaking. Captain, you need to see this. I'm sending you visual data now. The images that appeared on the screen made Lee's blood run cold. Mass graves stretched across an empty field. Bodies of different alien species were piled together. Some were adults, but many were clearly children. In another image, he saw the remains of what had once been a city, now reduced to ash and rubble. How old are these sites? Lee asked. The graves are recent, sir, maybe 6 months old. The destroyed city is older, perhaps 2 years. Captain, there are dozens of sites like this across this system, and I found something else. The next image showed a massive facility built into a mountainside. It looked like a factory, but the design was wrong for manufacturing goods. What am I looking at, Lieutenant? It's a processing center, sir. Based on the layout and the equipment I can scan from here, it was designed to handle large numbers of people. The refugees on the planet told me the Council called these places relocation centers. Commander Bora was studying the images on her own screen. Captain, this looks like the concentration camps from Earth's history, the ones we learned about in school. The terrible truth was becoming clear. The Council hadn't sent them to fight rebels. They had sent them to finish a genocide that was already in progress. The threats to shipping were actually refugees who had discovered evidence of mass murder. Sir, the communication officer spoke again. The planet's leaders are requesting a meeting. They say they have documents that prove the Council has been systematically destroying entire species for decades. Lee made a decision that would change everything. Tell them we'll meet, and get me Dr. Yoon on a secure channel. I think his archaeological research just became very relevant. When Dr. Yoon's image appeared on the screen, his face was pale. Captain, I've been analyzing the data Lieutenant Kang sent. Those ruins match the descriptions in the ancient records. I was studying. The same architectural style, the same destruction patterns. Captain, I think the Council has been doing this for thousands of years. Doing what, exactly? Genocide. Systematic elimination of any species they consider a threat, or simply inconvenient. The ancients weren't destroyed by a civil war. They were murdered by the early Council, and it's been happening ever since. Captain Oh Minji's voice came through the communication system again. Captain Lee, I'm receiving new orders from Council. Command, they want us to begin bombardment immediately. They're saying the rebels are preparing to escape and we need to stop them. Lee looked at the peaceful settlements on his screen. Families gathered around dinner tables, children sleeping in their beds. The Council wanted him to murder them all and call it peacekeeping. All ships, disregard those orders. We're going down to the planet to investigate. Sir, Bora said quietly, if we disobey direct orders from the Council, they'll consider us traitors. Commander, if we follow those orders, we'll be committing genocide. I'd rather be a traitor than a murderer. The landing party that went down to the planet consisted of Lee, Bora, Lieutenant Kang, and a small team of Marines. What they found was worse than the scanner readings had suggested. The refugees were members of dozens of different species, all with the same story. The Council had marked their worlds for development. Ships had arrived offering relocation to better planets. Those who agreed were taken to processing centers and never seen again. Those who refused were bombed from orbit. An elderly alien, named Vex, whose species Lee didn't recognize, showed them a hidden data storage device. We managed to save some of the Council's internal communications, Vex explained. They detail the entire program. They call it Galactic Optimization. The files were horrifying. Species were rated based on their usefulness to Council member worlds. Those deemed economically unviable or genetically inferior were scheduled for elimination. The list included over 200 species that had been destroyed in the past 50 years. But the worst discovery was yet to come. Kang found humanity's file. Captain, she said, her voice barely a whisper. We're on the list too. Phase 7 of the optimization program. They plan to eliminate us once they've finished using us to destroy the other species. Lee read the file, over her shoulder. It detailed how human military effectiveness made them perfect tools for the early phases of genocide. But it also noted that human unpredictability and moral flexibility made them dangerous allies in the long term. The plan was to use humanity to eliminate threats, then find an excuse to eliminate humanity itself. How long do we have? Bora asked. According to this timeline, they're planning to start Phase 7 within the next 2 years, Kang replied. Lee stood up slowly. Everything made sense now. The suspicious missions, the restricted information, the way other species feared humanity while council members treated them like disposable tools. They weren't peacekeepers. They were unwitting executioners, being prepared for their own execution. All teams return to the ships immediately, Lee ordered. We're leaving this system. What about the refugees? Bora asked. Lee looked out at the settlement where children were playing, unaware that death had been scheduled to arrive today. We're taking them with us, all of them. Sir, that will be seen as a direct violation of our orders. Good, Lee said grimly. It's time the Council learned that their pet humans have teeth. The reaction from the Galactic Council was swift and brutal. Within hours of Captain Lee Daeho's fleet leaving the Helix system with thousands of refugees, emergency sessions were called on Nexus Prime. Ambassador Park Ji-won found herself summoned to face the full council, but the usual diplomatic courtesy was gone. Chancellor Vorth of the Zilithian Empire stood at the center of the chamber, his 6 arms gesturing angrily. The humans have committed an act of treason against galactic peace. They were ordered to eliminate rebels, and instead they have aided criminals. With respect, Chancellor, Park replied, keeping her voice steady. The humans found no rebels in that system. Only civilian refugees fleeing persecution. Counselor Thex's translation device made harsh clicking sounds as he spoke. Lies. The intelligence reports clearly identified military targets. The humans have either become incompetent or treacherous. Park had seen the reports Lee sent back. The evidence of genocide was overwhelming, but she knew presenting it here would be useless. The Council had written those reports. They knew exactly what they had sent the humans to do. I request a formal hearing to review the evidence from the Helix system, Park said. Denied, Vorth replied immediately. The human delegation is hereby stripped of speaking privileges. You will observe while we decide humanity's punishment for this betrayal. Park watched helplessly as the council voted. Trade agreements were canceled. Human colonies would be cut off from essential supplies. Worst of all, humanity was declared a rogue species and stripped of all protection under galactic law. You have one chance to avoid complete destruction, Thex announced. Return the stolen refugees immediately and execute the officers responsible for this rebellion. You have 72 hours. Park stood up slowly. I will deliver your message to Earth, but I doubt President Han will agree to murder her own people for saving innocent lives. Then humanity has chosen extinction, Vorth said with satisfaction. Park left the chamber knowing she would never return. As she walked toward her shuttle, her personal communicator buzzed with an urgent message from Captain Lee Dae-ho. Ambassador, do not return to your quarters. Council security forces are moving to arrest all human personnel. Get to the emergency extraction point now. She changed direction immediately, heading for a maintenance section where Lee had arranged to pick up any humans who needed immediate evacuation. As she hurried through the corridors, she saw other human diplomatic staff doing the same thing. The Council's patience with humanity had finally run out. On Earth, President Han So-young stared at the emergency reports flooding her desk. The Council's ultimatum had been delivered, but so had the evidence from the Helix system. The videos of mass graves, the documents detailing systematic genocide, the revelation that humanity was next on the elimination list. Defense Minister Ro Jae-sung burst into her office without knocking. Madam President, we're receiving distress, calls from our outer colonies. Council forces are already moving to cut off supply lines. They're not waiting for the 72-hour deadline. How bad is it? Han asked. They've blockaded the Kepler colonies. No food or medical supplies are getting through. The Vega mining stations are reporting Council warships taking positions to cut off their escape routes. Foreign Secretary Bae Eunji entered behind Ro, her usually calm demeanor shattered. Madam President, I've been trying to contact our allies in the neutral systems. Most of them are refusing to speak with us. The ones who will talk say they can't risk Council retaliation by helping humanity. Han stood up and walked to the window, overlooking the capital city. Millions of people went about their daily lives unaware that their species had just been marked for extinction. She thought about the videos from Helix, about children playing in refugee camps while death approached from the stars. Dr. Yoon has finished his analysis of the historical records. Bei continued. The Council has been doing this for over 3,000 years. They've eliminated hundreds of species, always using the same methods. Create a conflict. Use allied forces to handle the dirty work. Then eliminate the allies when they become inconvenient. And humanity was always meant to be eliminated? Han asked. According to their own documents, yes. We were useful for removing other threats, but our independent nature and military capabilities made us too dangerous to keep alive long term. Ro placed a datapad on Han's desk. These are our current military assets. Every ship, every base, every soldier. If we're going to fight the entire Galactic Council, we need to know what we're working with. Han studied the numbers. Humanity had built an impressive military during their 15 years as galactic peacekeepers, but they were vastly outnumbered by the combined forces of the Council species. What about our secret research projects? She asked. Madam President? Bei looked confused. The weapons programs the Council restricted. The technologies, they said, were too dangerous for galactic peace. We've been working on those projects anyway, haven't we? Ro smiled grimly. Of course we have. No military leader trusts politicians, human or alien, to keep them safe forever. We've been developing contingency plans for 15 years. Show me. The classified briefing that followed changed everything. Humanity had indeed been developing restricted technologies in secret, weapons that could target specific genetic markers, defensive systems that made ships nearly invisible to Council sensors. Most importantly, they had been studying Council military tactics and technology, preparing for the day when their allies might become enemies. How long would it take to implement these systems across our entire fleet? Han asked. For full deployment? 6 months. But we could have prototype units ready in weeks. Han made her decision. Do it. And begin immediate evacuation of our most vulnerable colonies. If the Council wants a war, they'll get one. But it won't be the easy extermination they're expecting. Dr. Yoon had been working non-stop since returning from Nexus Prime. His archaeological expertise had become humanity's most valuable intelligence asset. The ancient records he'd studied revealed not just the Council's long history of genocide, but also the weaknesses in their strategies. President Han, he said during an emergency briefing, I've found something important in the old records. Every time the Council has eliminated a species, they've followed the same pattern. Cut off supplies, isolate the target, then use overwhelming force to finish them quickly. That matches what they're doing to us now, Ro observed. Exactly. But there's something else. In every case, the Council assumed their targets would follow standard military doctrine. They've never faced an enemy that was willing to completely abandon conventional warfare. What are you suggesting? Han asked. That we don't fight or they expect us to fight. They're prepared for human military efficiency within the rules of galactic warfare. They're not prepared for human creativity applied without any rules at all. Bei looked troubled. Dr. Yoon, you're talking about abandoning the laws of war, the protocols that govern civilized conflict. The Council abandoned those laws when they decided to commit genocide, Yoon replied. They used us to murder innocent people for 15 years. Now they want to murder us. I think the time for civilized responses has passed. Han looked around the room at her advisors. These were good people who had spent their careers trying to build a better future for humanity, among the stars. Now they were being asked to plan for total war against an enemy that wanted their species extinct. The Council has made their choice, she said finally. They see us as tools to be used and then discarded. They've forgotten something important about tools, though. What's that, Madam President? Ro asked. When you try to throw away a hammer, sometimes the hammer fights back. Send a message to every human colony, every ship, every outpost. Tell them the Council has declared war on our species. Tell them we're not going to die quietly. The message that went out to humanity's scattered forces was simple. The Council crossed the line. We are no longer peacekeepers. We are survivors, and we will act accordingly. The first sign that humanity would not go quietly came 3 weeks after President Han's declaration. Admiral Choi Sung-woo had divided the human fleet into small, fast-moving groups that struck at Council forces without warning and disappeared before reinforcements could arrive. Commander Kim Bora led one of these groups in a daring raid on a Council supply depot in the Outer Rim. Instead of the expected military supplies, they found something much worse: transport ships designed to carry large numbers of prisoners. The holding cells were built for different alien species, each one customized for maximum suffering. Admiral Bora reported over secure communications, "We've found evidence of another genocide in progress. The Council is rounding up the Kirath species. These ships are designed to transport them to processing centers." "How many ships?" Choi asked. 47 transports plus a dozen escort vessels. "Sir, if we let them leave, thousands of Kirath civilians will die." Choi made the decision that defined humanity's new war doctrine: destroy the transports, save the civilians. The battle was swift and decisive. Human ships, no longer bound by Council rules of engagement, used tactics that the enemy couldn't predict or counter. Captain Oh Min-ji's destroyer disabled the escort ships while Bora's fighters destroyed the empty transports. The Council forces had expected a standard engagement. Instead, they faced human warfare without restrictions. The rescued Kirath provided intelligence that proved invaluable. They revealed the locations of other Council operations, including the positions of mobile processing centers that moved from system to system. More importantly, they spread word throughout the galaxy that humans were now actively fighting against the Council's genocide program. Major Seo Dong-hyun established the first hidden base in neutral space, using construction techniques the humans had learned from 15 years of building temporary installations on hostile worlds. But these bases were different. They were designed to be invisible to Council sensors and completely self-sufficient. The beauty of fighting a bureaucratic enemy, Seo explained to his engineering team, is that they think in terms of official borders and registered territories. They're not looking for bases that don't officially exist. Engineer Lim Hae-won had been working around the clock to modify human weapon systems. Without Council oversight restricting their technology, she was able to implement improvements that had been theoretical for years. "Admiral Choi," she reported during a strategy meeting, "we've successfully tested the new targeting systems. We can now track and engage Council ships that are using their stealth technology." "How is that possible?" "Their stealth systems have been completely effective for decades. Because we were never allowed to develop countermeasures before. The Council made sure that human technology stayed just advanced enough to be useful, but not advanced enough to threaten them. Now that we're developing everything they restricted, we're finding that their advantages aren't as absolute as they claimed." Dr. Yoon had become more than just an archaeologist. His knowledge of ancient Council tactics was being used to predict their modern strategies. "They're going to try to isolate our core worlds next," he told President Han during a secure briefing. "Based on historical patterns, they'll attempt to cut off Earth, Mars, and the primary colonies from each other. Can we prevent that?" "Defense?" Minister Rowe asked. "We don't need to prevent it," Yoon replied. "We can use it against them. Let them think they've succeeded in isolating us, then strike from directions they're not watching." Intelligence Officer Nam Min-ho had developed a psychological warfare program that was proving devastatingly effective. Human forces began broadcasting Council communications they had intercepted, revealing the genocide program to species that had been kept ignorant of it. "The Council's greatest weakness," Nam explained, "is that most of their member species actually believe the official propaganda about protecting galactic peace. When they learn the truth about the extermination program, many of them are horrified." The first major Council species to break away was the Altarian Republic. Their representative, shocked by evidence of systematic genocide, announced that Altair would no longer support Council operations. Within days, 3 more species followed suit. Chancellor Vorth was furious. "The humans are poisoning the minds of our allies with lies and propaganda." "Are they lies?" asked Councillor Reth of the Centauri Union. "I've seen the evidence they're broadcasting. Those appear to be authentic Council communications ordering the elimination of entire species. Those communications are classified. The humans are criminals for intercepting them. But are they real?" Vorth's silence was answer enough. The council was starting to fracture as member species realized they might be next on the extermination list. Captain Lee Dae-ho led a rescue mission to the Vega system, where council forces had trapped human colonists and were demanding their surrender. Instead of a direct assault, Lee used a tactic that would become known as human logic. He did something the enemy thought was impossible. "Sir," his communications officer reported, "the council commander is demanding that we surrender immediately or he'll begin executing civilians." "Tell him we accept his terms," Lee replied calmly. Commander Bo-Ra, who was serving as his tactical officer, looked shocked. "Captain, tell him we're sending over our surrender documents now." What Lee actually sent was a modified cargo pod containing enough explosive to destroy the council command ship. The enemy commander, expecting surrender papers, brought the pod directly into his ship's bridge. The explosion eliminated the entire command structure of the blockading force. "Human logic," Lee explained to his officers as they rescued the colonists from the remaining ships. "Do something so unexpected that the enemy can't adapt in time to stop it." Engineer Lim Hae-won achieved her greatest breakthrough 6 months into the war. She had been studying council biology and genetic records captured during raids. "Admiral," she reported to Choi with barely controlled excitement, "I've developed something that will end this war." "What kind of something?" "Weapons that can target specific genetic markers. We can create viruses or toxins that will only affect council leadership species while leaving everyone else unharmed." The room fell silent. Choi understood the implications immediately. "Lim, that's a genocide weapon." "Yes, sir. The same kind the council has been using against other species for thousands of years. The difference is we can be selective. We can target only the leadership species that are driving the extermination program, or even specific individuals within those species. And the moral implications? With respect, Admiral, the Council made the decision to play by these rules when they started their genocide program. They wanted to see what humans were capable of when we stopped trying to be peaceful. This is what we're capable of. General Park Min-seo proved that human unpredictability was their greatest weapon when he single-handedly liberated the entire Kepler sector. Instead of engaging Council forces directly, he spread rumors that the sector contained ancient weapons that could destroy entire fleets. The Council, remembering stories of the ancients' advanced technology, sent massive forces to secure these supposed superweapons, while their entire military was focused on searching empty planets for weapons that didn't exist. Park's small force liberated all the civilian populations and destroyed the real military infrastructure. The Council has spent so long believing their own propaganda about human primitiveness, Park explained, that they can't understand when we're being simple and when we're being complex. They expected sophisticated military tactics, so I gave them children's stories about magic weapons. They fell for it completely. By the end of the first year of war, the galaxy had changed completely. Human forces controlled dozens of systems, not through conquest but through liberation. Species that had been marked for elimination were now under human protection. The Council's military was demoralized and confused, unable to adapt to an enemy that refused to fight by any recognizable rules. Most importantly, the Council's political unity was collapsing. Member species were abandoning the alliance as evidence of genocide became impossible to deny. Some were switching sides entirely, offering to help humanity in exchange for protection from Council retaliation. "The war isn't over," Admiral Choi told his officers during a strategy meeting. "But the Council's position is becoming impossible. They wanted to eliminate humanity because we were too unpredictable to control. Now they're learning exactly what human unpredictability looks like when it's focused on destroying them." Captain Oh Minji, now commanding a mixed fleet of human and allied ships, had the final word. "They crossed the line when they decided our species should die. Now they get to learn why that was a mistake." 18 months after humanity abandoned peace, the war had turned into something the Galactic Council never expected, a complete disaster for them. Admiral Choi Sung-woo stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching as another Council stronghold fell to human forces. The enemy was no longer putting up serious resistance in most sectors. "Admiral," Commander Kim Bo-Ra reported, The Zilithian Fourth Fleet is requesting permission to surrender. They're offering to hand over Chancellor Vorth's location in exchange for safe passage to neutral space. Granted, Choi replied without hesitation. Tell them humanity doesn't execute prisoners of war, unlike their former allies. The transformation had been remarkable. Human forces now controlled nearly a third of the galaxy, but not through conquest. Species after species had voluntarily joined what was being called the Free Alliance, seeking protection from the Council's increasingly desperate attempts to maintain power. Captain Lee Dae-ho was leading the assault on Nexus Prime itself, the Council's primary station. The operation was designed to be as much psychological warfare as military action. Instead of destroying the station, human forces were broadcasting live footage of their advance through its corridors. Citizens of the galaxy, Lee announced as his Marines secured another section, you are seeing the end of the Council's reign of terror. Every species they marked for elimination, every world they planned to destroy, every family they intended to murder, all of it is documented in these databases we're recovering. Dr. Yoon had become the war's most valuable intelligence asset. His understanding of Council psychology allowed human forces to predict their enemies' reactions with frightening accuracy. They're going to make one final attempt to destroy Earth, he warned President Han during an emergency briefing. What makes you so certain? Defense Minister Rowe asked. Because that's what they always do when their systematic approach fails. According to historical records, when the Council faces a species they can't control, they attempt to destroy that species' homeworld as an example to others. Can they succeed? President Han asked. Not if we're prepared for it. The Council's final gambit has always been massive, overwhelming force applied to a single target, but they've never faced an enemy that could predict their strategy and prepare countermeasures. Engineer Lim Hai-wan had spent months perfecting humanity's ultimate weapon. The genetic targeting system was now capable of eliminating specific individuals across vast distances. Madam President, she reported, the weapon is ready for deployment. We can eliminate the entire Council leadership simultaneously, regardless of where they're hiding. How selective can you be? Han asked. Completely selective. We can target specific individuals, specific bloodlines, or specific genetic markers. The weapon will ignore everyone except the intended targets. President Han stared at the technical specifications. The power to commit selective genocide was now in her hands, the same power the Council had used to eliminate hundreds of species over thousands of years. There's something else, Lim continued. I've discovered that the Council leadership species have been genetically modifying themselves for centuries. They've made themselves dependent on artificial genetic modifications that need constant maintenance. If we disrupt those modifications, they die naturally? Their own genetic engineering kills them. We wouldn't even need to deploy weapons. Just interfere with their medical systems and let their modified biology do the rest. The final battle for Nexus Prime lasted 6 hours. Commander No Ye-jin coordinated simultaneous strikes on 12 Council strongholds, each one falling within minutes of the assault beginning. Human tactics had evolved beyond anything the galaxy had seen before. The key, No explained to her officers, is that we're not fighting 12 separate battles. We're fighting one battle in 12 locations. When the enemy responds to our attack here, they weaken their defenses there. Human coordination and communication technology lets us think faster than they can react. Captain Oh Min-ji led the strike force that captured the Council's central command center. What they found there was beyond horrifying. The records detailed not just the current genocide program, but centuries of systematic extermination. Entire galactic civilizations had been wiped out and their existence erased from history. Admiral Choi, she reported, the scope of this is bigger than we imagined. According to these records, the galaxy originally contained over 3,000 intelligent species. Only about 200 survive today. What happened to the others? The Council happened. They've been optimizing galactic civilization for millennia, eliminating any species they considered unnecessary or threatening. The psychological impact on Council forces was devastating. As more records were recovered and broadcast, their own soldiers began deserting. Many Council species had genuinely believed they were part of a peaceful alliance. Learning the truth, about systematic genocide shattered their morale completely. General Park Min-seo achieved the war's most significant victory when he captured Chancellor Vorth alive. Instead of a dramatic military assault, Park simply walked into Vorth's hiding place and asked him to surrender. "How did you find me?" Vorth demanded. "You're hiding in the same type of bunker your forces used on 37 different worlds when they were conducting genocide operations," Park explained calmly. "Dr. Yoon predicted you would choose this location based on historical patterns. You've been following the same playbook for thousands of years." "Impossible. Our strategies are constantly evolving." "No, they're not. You're bureaucrats, not warriors. You follow procedures and protocols. Once we understood your procedures, beating you became simple." The interrogation of Chancellor Vorth revealed the final piece of the puzzle. The Council's genocide program wasn't just about eliminating threats. It was about creating a galaxy populated only by species that could be easily controlled. The goal was always complete dominance, Vorth confessed under questioning. A galaxy where every species was dependent on the Council for survival. Independent species like humanity were inconvenient. "And now?" President Han asked during the recorded interrogation. "Now you've destroyed everything we built over 3,000 years. The galaxy will descend into chaos without Council guidance." "No," Han replied firmly. "The galaxy will finally have a chance to grow without someone trying to murder anyone who thinks differently." As news of Vorth's capture spread, the remaining Council resistance collapsed entirely. Species that had been loyal to the Alliance for centuries abandoned it completely. Some requested to join the Free Alliance, while others simply declared independence. Captain Lee Dae-ho found himself standing in the ruins of the Council chambers where Ambassador Park had once tried to reason with these creatures. Now the Great Hall was empty except for scattered documents and broken furniture. "Strange to think this is where it all started," Commander Bora said, joining him. "This is where it ended," Lee corrected. "It started when they decided our species should die. They just didn't realize they were starting their own countdown timer." Engineer Lim Hae-won made the final technical breakthrough that ensured the Council could never rise again. She had learned to reverse their genetic modifications, returning the leadership species to their original biology. "The beautiful irony," she explained to President Han, "is that their natural forms are actually healthier and longer-lived than their modified versions. We're not punishing them. We're freeing them from their own genetic prison." Dr. Yoon completed his analysis of the recovered historical records, creating a complete timeline of the Council's crimes. "The evidence is overwhelming," he reported. "Genocide on a scale that's almost impossible to comprehend. They eliminated entire civilizations and erased their existence from galactic memory." "What do we do with that information?" Han asked. "We make sure it's never forgotten. Every species in the galaxy needs to know what happened here, so it can never happen again." The war officially ended when the last Council Loyalist fleet surrendered to Admiral Choi. But unlike previous galactic conflicts, there was no peace treaty, no negotiated settlement. The Council simply ceased to exist as an organization. "They made one fundamental error," Choi told his officers during the final briefing. "They assumed that because humanity had agreed to serve as peacekeepers, we would continue to serve no matter how we were treated. They forgot that peace is a choice, not a default state." President Han addressed the galaxy from the former Council chambers, standing where Chancellor Vorth had once issued execution orders disguised as policy decisions. "Citizens of the galaxy," she began, "today marks the end of 3,000 years of systematic oppression and genocide. The Council is gone, not because we destroyed it, but because its member species chose to abandon it when they learned the truth about its crimes. The Free Alliance that emerged from the war's ashes was fundamentally different from the Council. Membership was voluntary. Decisions were made democratically, and no species was considered more valuable than any other. But most importantly, the galaxy now knew what happened when humanity abandoned peace. The lesson was clear. Treat humans as equals and partners, and they would be the most loyal allies imaginable. Try to use them as tools for genocide, and they would become the most terrifying enemy the universe had ever seen."